Thousands on flood alert, a flurry of first-time buyers, and Donald Trump condemns a former British spy. You're watching 5 News Tonight. Storm surges, snow and high winds hit much of the country as people in vulnerable towns are told to leave.
I don't like it, but it's a necessary evil.
When are you coming back, Caroline?
Hopefully tomorrow, if nothing goes wrong.
How getting on the housing ladder is getting easier, but it depends where you live. And the woman who died from cervical cancer after being refused a smear test because she was too young. Also tonight, I'll be talking about that Donald Trump dossier and the former MI6 officer behind it. Christopher Steele has been called a failed spy by the president-elect, but has he given British intelligence a bad name? Good evening, this is 5 News Tonight. I'm Matt Barbett. Towns and villages right up and down England's east coast are on flood alert this evening as wintry weather brings fears of storm surges. More than 100 flood warnings are in place, 17 of them are severe, meaning there is a danger to life. Thousands are being evacuated in Jaywick in Essex and Great Yarmouth in Norfolk before this evening's high tide. We'll bring you the nationwide picture shortly, but first, Dominic Reynolds reports from Jaywick.
Stay put or get out. The decisions are written on the doors in Jaywick. The police say the 2,500 people here need to leave or risk being forced out by a flood.
Scared, yeah, of course I am, yeah, because there's loads of children and old people.
Coralina said she fears for herself and her cats, and they were all out of the door first thing.
How do you feel about going at this point?
I don't like it, but it's a necessary evil.
When are you coming back, Caroline?
Hopefully tomorrow, if nothing goes wrong.
Walking through the rain with everything she could take was Michelle.
You've packed up pretty much everything here.
I've packed up all my valuables and paperwork and
Two furry valuables here.
these are my most precious. At the end of the day, if something bad does happen and nothing was done, then people would be up in arms saying, why wasn't this done, why wasn't that done?
So here's what the authorities are worried about. This is the edge of the town of Jaywick. And over here, about 50 feet away, is the sea wall. Now, the concern is that at the next high tide, around about midnight, the water could push right over this wall and come up through the drains.
A change in the direction of the wind is all it would take. Only the oldest in Jaywick will remember the damage a tidal surge can do. 35 people died here in 1953 when the sea overwhelmed England's east coast. Now that coast is better defended, but further up from Jaywick, 5,000 people were preparing to leave too. Great Yarmouth could be breached when the next tide comes in. But it's already happened in Whitby, the River Esk threatening to flow right into people's homes, keeping authorities busy and residents on high alert, while the tidal surge from the sea is hitting the town from the other side. And in Scarborough, the seas left roads inches underwater, and it left 2 risk takers dangerously close to being pulled in. Back in Jaywick are risk takers too, choosing to ignore the official advice.
It would have just trickled over the top of the wall.
You think people are overreacting?
Yeah, there's nothing going to happen here, nothing.
It's a nightmare because they always want to take their stuff and you can't really, do you know what I mean? It's too much, and then to bring it all back when nothing happens, it's not worth it.
You're taking your chances.
Yeah, and I don't want to leave this time anyway in case nothing happens and then my place to get robbed.
Whatever the doubters think, on the edge of town are some very real resources. Half of Jaywick is staying at home, the rest is leaving. Who's right? In just over 6 hours, these waters and the wind will give their answer.
Well, Dom sent us an update from Jaywick a short time ago.
That high tide everybody will be watching is set to come at about 12:30 tonight, just after midnight. But worth mentioning that some of the uncertainty in this town is down to what happened 3 years ago. This entire area was evacuated, more than 2,500 people, and the waters never came over the wall. So lots of people not wanting to repeat what happened that year. As for what the rest of the country can expect in the next 24 hours, well, in Scotland and in North Yorkshire, there's a level 3 warning because of low temperatures. Vulnerable people especially are supposed to take heed of that. Could go lower than -3. Elsewhere, the next 24 hours for the east of England, right down to London, could well mean snow, and that could mean more disruption.
Yes, that's the picture where Dom is in Jaywick, but it is by no means the only place that's being affected by weather, as you heard. You can see the scale of the disruption on this map from the Environment Agency. Threats across much of the eastern and southern coasts, all the way down to the southwest and South Wales as well. There are 73 flood alerts in place, meaning flooding there is possible, and residents in these areas need to be aware of fast-changing conditions. More concerning are the 91 flood warnings. That means flooding is expected, and people living in those parts of the country need to take immediate action. At the highest level, 17 severe flood warnings are in place. There is an imminent danger to life in those areas. And the threat isn't just from flooding either. Have a look at this. The bits in yellow are where there is a real risk from ice on the roads. As you can see, it's covering most of the country, an awful lot of Scotland and Wales. Louise Beale reports now on the national picture.
Waking up to wintry scenes this morning, much of the UK has been left shivering thanks to snow, ice and high winds. In Buxton here in the Peak District, the conditions have left the town in a spin. Schools have shut, bus services have been cancelled and many aren't happy.
It isn't good enough, no, because people have got the jobs to go to and things like that, haven't they, you know, so no, it's not good enough. Not very happy about it at all.
On my road, you can't come or go, so I think they've actually locked it off because we've had about sort of 5 inches of snow.
But I've managed to get to work. I've sledged in with my daughter and she came with me to work, but we were only there for an hour because there weren't many people in.
Is it frustrating?
Yes, I mean, when you look at countries abroad who have a lot more snow than this and can carry on regardless.
Snow and high winds have worked their way across the country, and it's the roads that have been worst affected. The cold and ice got the better of these drivers, while strong winds in Scotland played havoc with lorries like this one. Gritters are doing their best, but it's a race against time as the snow is melting and temperatures are plummeting yet again. But obviously it might freeze later, and that's
it will freeze later. So we just have to try and get as much gritted and ploughed as we can now, and then hopefully tomorrow it won't be too bad.
For many, the snow has provided a welcome break from work and school. But with temperatures not set to rise anytime soon, the disruption may not be over yet. Louise Beale, 5 News.
That looks pleasant. It isn't all that way, though. Alex D will be here at the end of the programme with a full forecast for the weekend. Next, the crisis in NHS emergency units has deepened further as new figures show more than 40% of hospitals in England had to declare a major alert in the first week of the year. A&E departments have been overwhelmed by the number of patients and shortages of beds. 65 trusts experienced major pressures and 6 even reached the highest level of alert. But health experts are warning that once pressures do become more widespread, it becomes far harder to then get a grip of the situation.
What we are seeing is a real geographic pattern, and what I think we're seeing is one organisation gets into difficulty, it tries to divert patients somewhere else. Unfortunately, they can't cope, and you get a domino effect as one organisation after another begins to declare operational problems.
Labour MP Tristram Hunt has announced he is leaving politics, triggering a by-election in Stoke-on-Trent Central. He's also a published historian and is stepping down to become the director of the Victoria and Albert Museum in London. He's the second Labour MP to resign since Jeremy Corbyn was re-elected as leader.
No, I don't want anyone to resign. I don't want to lose MPs, but he has taken this position as director of the V&A. Good luck to him. No, I'm not expecting any other MPs to resign, and obviously we will face any by-elections that come along. In most parliaments there are a number of by-elections, so if they come, they come.
Donald Trump has lashed out at the former MI6 officer who's behind the extraordinary dossier that's about the president-elect. Christopher Steele has been widely identified as having compiled the memo, which contains unverified allegations about Mr. Trump's private life, as well as his supposed ties to Russia. With him now in hiding, Donald Trump took to Twitter to go on the attack against Mr. Steele, as well as his political opponents. He said, "It now turns out that the phony allegations against me were put together by my political opponents and a failed spy afraid of being sued. Totally made up facts by sleazebag political operatives, both Democrats and Republicans. Fake news. Russia says nothing exists." That's what he tweeted. Well, just before I came on air, I spoke to former Foreign Office Minister Kim Howells, who was also chairman of the Intelligence and Security Committee. I asked him whether the row was giving British intelligence a bad name.
Well, it may well be the case, actually. The Russians have never liked MI6 for obvious reasons. And I think that those old animosities from the Cold War seem to have returned with a vengeance, really. So I think there's a lot of bridge building that's going to have to be done after this.
I know you're not aware of this man, Christopher Steele, who is thought to have written this dossier. He's gone into hiding now, perhaps understandably. The Russians say, though, there's no such thing as an ex-spy, i.e., could he still be working for MI6?
I doubt if he's working for MI6, but that's not the same thing as saying that he isn't in contact with his old colleagues in MI6. He may well be. The whole business now of intelligence gathering by the private sector, by private companies like his company, Orbis, for business and for all kinds of organizations, it's become a big business. It earns these companies a lot of money, and their pulling power is to take the expertise that they learned within the intelligence agencies with them into the private sector. So I guess when the Russians make this claim that really it's MI6, it's not a private company, he's never really left, they're really, I guess, trying to exploit that blurred area between what the private sector does in intelligence gathering and what our intelligence and security agencies do on behalf of the government.
Well, if it is open to exploitation from countries that aren't particularly friendly towards the UK, like Russia, isn't that something that the government should be looking at, these former spies going on to take lucrative contracts on the basis of the knowledge they've gained from working for this country?
I'm sure the government must be concerned about it and has been for some time. It hasn't been as high profile a problem as it is right now. I mean, this is jaw-droppingly high profile. But undoubtedly, this business has gone on for a very long time. And of course, the whole business of intelligence gathering has always been blurred. There have been journalists, for example, who've operated in other countries, in enemy countries, who've often reported back to the intelligence agencies. It's not new, it's well documented. And I guess it may well result in life being a bit more difficult for those freelancers, for those people who are on the edge of actually being full-time employees for an intelligence agency and making a good deal of money out of it. And remember, one of the reasons why we've had spies since Walsingham's day is that there's money to be made out of it.
Finally, Kim, with the incoming president having to deny pretty unseemly allegations, Britain's security service and former members of it having to answer questions themselves, it's the Russians, isn't it, who come out of this winning?
It looks like that at the moment, although I must say I've been watching these hearings of the appointees Trump has put in place, and some of them don't sound like great friends of Russia to me. Now, the problem, of course, is there's so much double talk and double dealing in all of this that it's very, very difficult to try and predict what will be the true nature of Trump's foreign policy. I think what's absolutely certain is that almost every expert that I speak to, everybody in the know at the moment, they regard Russia as a serious problem. They regard China as a serious problem. And those old Cold War animosities, I don't think they're going to go away. And one way or another, I'm afraid that Donald Trump is going to have to come to terms with that. And he's going to have to decide whether he believes his own intelligence services with their mighty assets of intelligence gathering, or if he's going to go with his own instinct or this strange attitude that he has towards Vladimir Putin. It's going to be extremely interesting to watch this, and we're all going to have to watch it very carefully, I think.
That's true. He doesn't seem to believe anybody right now. Kim Howells, many thanks indeed for joining us.
Thank you.
Still to come on 5 News tonight. How first-time buyers are defying the odds, but not everyone is so optimistic. And
I am pleased to award our nation's highest civilian honor, the Presidential Medal of Freedom.
Obama's goodbye gift. Vice President Joe Biden gets a very big thank you from the man he has served for 8 years and sheds a few tears in the process. See more of that after the break. Welcome back. You're watching 5 News Tonight. The brother and sister of a young woman who died from cervical cancer are campaigning to change the law to stop the tragedy happening to other families. Amber Cliff had repeatedly asked for a smear test but was refused because it isn't offered on the NHS until the age of 25. Amber was that age when she died from the disease on Sunday. Ruth Liptrot reports.
Amber Cliff had repeatedly asked her doctor for a smear test because she'd had abdominal pains and difficult periods. She was refused because she was under 25. Eventually, she paid for a private test, but by then she had advanced cervical cancer. Josh and Cameron are her brother and sister.
She kept getting told it's a water infection, it's your pill, it's your hormones. She was never offered a smear test, and even though she was asking, she was always told no.
She died on Sunday after the cancer had spread to her lungs and throat. So why aren't women under 25 entitled to a test? Well, changes in the bodies of young women mean that routine screening can often produce false test results, which can then lead to them having procedures that they don't need. Now, though, her family want the guidelines to be changed so that women under 25 are entitled to a smear test if they have any symptoms of cervical cancer.
It's like them saying cancer can't enter your body till you're 25, like it's some sort of legally binding contract, and it's ridiculous.
Just since Monday, more than 125,000 people have signed the petition for Amber's law, and yet it was only a week ago that she was taken to hospital for the last time.
I mean, even the Saturday before she died, she got rushed into hospital 1 o'clock in the morning on the Saturday. An ambulance came for her. She went back and got her makeup bag and took her into hospital. Like, you know, this is like you're talking maybe like less than 48 hours before she dies. She's just so determined.
Josh and Cameron want to make sure that no one else has to lose a sister or daughter, but they're struggling to come to terms with the fact that Amber's death might have been prevented and that she'll never get to be an auntie to the baby Cameron's having in March.
She will be here now if they're to give her the test when she asked for it.
She was going to be my birthing partner and she was so excited for it because she was like, I've never seen anyone like give birth before, I really want to. And I was like, you seem more excited than me. She was like, I am. So it is really sad that you won't get to see my baby.
Amber's funeral will take place next week, but her family are determined that she won't be forgotten. Ruth Liptrot, 5 News.
With me now is Robert Music, who's from the charity Joe's Cervical Cancer Trust. And Robert, I know you agree that it's very brave of Amber's family to talk about this so soon, but you'll also understand why they're asking questions about why she couldn't have had a smear test. Ruth touched upon it in a report. Just explain a bit more about the problems of the under 25s having this kind of thing.
Sure, absolutely. So the experts out there have reviewed the evidence. This is across the UK, so all 4 UK countries don't start screening until 25. And the reason for that is, what they say is that if it's under 25, it potentially can do more harm than good. So cervical cancer, in over 99% of all cases, is caused by a very common virus called the human papillomavirus. For most of us, 80% of us will have it at some time in our life, but our immune system will naturally get rid of it for most.
So how unusual then is it for a woman under the age of 25 to develop cancer because of HPV?
So in terms of cervical cancer in women under 25, it's rare, but HPV is more common in women under 25. So what the experts are saying, what the evidence is saying, is that there is a risk that you could then over-treat younger women if you invite them for a smear test when the immune system will naturally make it go away. If you then potentially that could lead to damaging the cervix, that could then result into preterm labour, and obviously a risk to the mum and risk to the daughter.
So obviously, in a case like Amber's, and we remember Jade Goody as well, who died at the age of just 27 from cervical cancer, the symptoms that they display become vitally important.
Absolutely, and I think that's absolutely key. It's almost trying to separate I guess, the cervical smear test, which is a programme to prevent cervical cancer, to recognition and awareness of symptoms. And I think what's really important, I guess, in terms of this case, and I think generally, is that there is already a pathway in place for health professionals, so that if a woman presents with specific symptoms, such as bleeding after sexual intercourse or bleeding in between periods, that actually they should examine, and then if there's a problem, they should refer.
Just briefly, Robert, looking ahead into the future, because of vaccinations against HPV being brought in for younger women, you're hopeful that cervical cancer can be eradicated.
I think our vision is that this could be a disease that can be eradicated. The vaccine has got amazing opportunities to reduce incidence. So they reckon that by 2025 there could be a 2/3 reduction in incidence in women under 30. That's fantastic, but we've got to encourage more women to attend.
It cannot come too soon. Many thanks indeed, Robert.
Thank you.
A court has heard how Rolf Harris allegedly assaulted a 12-year-old girl as she stood next to her mother while asking for his autograph. The disgraced children's entertainer, who's currently in jail in Stafford, is facing 7 new counts of alleged attacks on victims, including young girls and the disabled woman. He denies all the charges. A teenager accused of murdering 7-year-old Katie Ruff has appeared at Leeds Crown Court today via video link. The little girl was found badly injured in a field in York on Monday and died shortly after in hospital. The 15-year-old, who cannot be named for legal reasons, did not speak during the 5-minute hearing. She's been remanded in youth detention. And there's been a third day of strikes by Southern Rail drivers, causing disruption for 300,000 passengers. The action comes as part of a long-running dispute over driver-only trains. Of course, a series of further walkouts are planned for later this month. The number of first-time buyers in the UK has had a 10-year high, according to new figures from the Halifax. But the average first-time deposit has more than doubled in that time, jumping to more than £32,000 and around £100,000 in London. Layla Hayes has the story.
We're constantly told house prices are going up. Yet surprisingly, the number of first-time buyers is also rising. Chris Bull has just bought a flat with his girlfriend. They used savings and help from family, and he admits they were lucky.
When you do open the door for the first time, it's a little overwhelming, especially buying a property which needed a little bit of work, but that's what we wanted to do. But it's fantastic to have a space of your own. You know, as soon as you put your stamp on it, either a lick of paint or your furniture, it goes an awful long way, and you sit back and it's pretty nice.
There were more than 335,000 first-time buyers in the UK last year, the highest number since 2007. The average price of a first home was £200,000. In London, more than £400,000. And the average first-time deposit is now more than £32,000. In London, it's more than £100,000.
In some cases, lenders are letting first-time buyers take out a loan with a smaller deposit than they were asking for maybe 5 years ago, maybe 5% or 10%. There are also government schemes at play. There are government schemes set up to help first-time buyers get on the housing ladder.
Olivia Rodgard is a finance journalist. She understands mortgages, but says on her salary, she can't even get one.
There's no way that I could secure a mortgage, and it's also very hard to save because rents are so high. They are quite often half of your monthly salary, and then you've got very little left over at the end of the month after paying for all your expenses as well, to be able to save up for a deposit. So it's a difficult situation all round.
The number of first-time buyers is rising, but more than a quarter now take out a mortgage lasting at least 30 years. They may be on the ladder, but paying off the loan is a whole different problem. Layla Hayes, 5 News.
I'm joined by personal finance expert Jasmine Bertha. It's not all good news, is it? Because yes, they might be getting on the ladder, but 32 grand for a deposit, 100 grand if you're in London is eye-watering for anybody, really, Absolutely. Unless you're a multi-millionaire.
Yeah, yes.
So how are people doing it?
Well, I think a lot aren't. If you talk to millennials, the only ones really that are finding a place, certainly in London, are those who've got bank of mum and dad, either parents or grandparents, who can at least help them with the deposit, if not necessarily help them with the mortgage itself.
The right to buy scheme as well was touched upon there. That has made a difference, hasn't it?
Absolutely, and the Help to Buy scheme also helped. I mean, you've got the government basically guaranteeing the payments of the mortgages. So that meant that mortgage companies were happier to offer 5%, just a 5% deposit, and then not such a high rate on the mortgage itself, because there are quite a lot of 5% deposit mortgages around. In other words, you have to get a mortgage for 95%, but the rates are generally much higher than the other ones.
95% maybe, but then, as we're hearing, you've got to pay it off over a much longer period, 30 years, 40 years even.
Absolutely. And as you know, with loans, and a mortgage is just a massive, great loan, the longer you take to pay something off, on the whole, the cheaper the monthly rate, but the total amount that you pay is much, much more. Because when you borrow money, it's really, you rent it. You pay rent in terms of interest. So the more months, years that you take, the more in the end you're actually paying. But it does make it easier to pay in the short term, at least.
In the short term, a final question, Jasmine, is this all sustainable?
Gosh, I've been saying for years that the whole mortgage, the whole housing market's not sustainable, but it keeps going. I think at the moment we are seeing a softening of the house prices, particularly in London. I think it will probably expand into the rest of the country this year because simply the uncertainty, people are not wanting to make big financial decisions when they really don't know what's happening. So that's a bit of a help, I think, to first-time buyers, but ultimately I think it's going to carry on going up, I'm afraid.
Thanks, Jasmine.
Thank you.
Finally, with Donald Trump preparing to be sworn in as US president this time next week, the man he is replacing has been honouring his vice president. Joe Biden has been Barack Obama's right-hand man the whole time he's been in office, and as well as being political partners, they are famously good friends. It's a bromance. Last night, Mr. Obama paid him the ultimate tribute.
I am pleased to award our nation's highest civilian honor, the Presidential Medal of Freedom.
As you can see, Biden was visibly moved at a surprise ceremony in the White House, but there was also time for laughter as they reflected on their legendary double act.
This also gives the internet one last chance to talk about our bromance. It was 8.5 years ago that I chose Joe to be my vice president. There has not been a single moment since that time that I've doubted the wisdom of that decision. He was the best possible choice, not just for me, but for the American people.
This is a remarkable man. And I just hope that the asterisk in history that is attached to my name when they talk about this presidency is that I can say I was part of the journey of a remarkable man.
A lot of love in that room. All change next week. That's it from us for now, though. Alex Deakin has the weekend weather, and Sam will be here with your updates throughout the evening. Thanks for watching. See you again on Monday. Bye-bye.